There is a rhythm to life, a movement of light and shadow, a dance that begins with the first breath and ends with the last sigh. We often think of joy and sorrow as opposites, as two separate forces, one that lifts us and one that drags us down. We see joy as something to be embraced and sorrow as something to be avoided. But Khalil Gibran spoke of a deeper truth. Your joy is your sorrow unmasked. Joy and sorrow are not separate, not enemies, not opposing forces. They are partners in a dance that is as old as time, interwoven, inseparable. Each one gives birth to the other. Think of a river, flowing peacefully in the light of the sun. But the river would not be the same without the storm that once stirred its waters. The calm would be shallow without the depth of the storm. And so it is with joy and sorrow, the peep lake. Depth of sorrow gives rise to the height of joy, and the light of joy makes the darkness of sorrow more meaningful. When we experience joy, it often feels fleeting, transitory, like something that exists only in the moment. But joy does not come from the world alone. It is a reflection of our own inner peace, our capacity to embrace both the light and the dark. In the same way, sorrow does not destroy us, but shapes us, molds us into a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world. Without sorrow, we would not know joy's sweetness, because it is in the contrast of the two that we learn to live fully. Gibran reminds us that joy and sorrow are not two separate beings, but two halves of the same heart. They are both necessary for the soul's growth. To experience one fully, we must be willing to meet the other. And so, they dance, one leading, then the other, each taking its turn, until the two become one. Your joy is your sorrow unmasked, and in that revelation we find the fullness of life. We wear our sorrow like a mask, a veil that covers the face of our true selves. At times, it feels heavy, weighed down by grief, by loss, by pain. It becomes part of who we are, a shape we mold to protect ourselves. But behind this mask, hidden beneath the layers of sorrow, is joy. Khalil Gibran wrote, "Your sorrow is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding." We often believe sorrow is something to escape, something to avoid, something to bury. We tell ourselves that joy is the only path to peace, and so we fight against our sorrow. We try to remove it, to deny it, to run from it. But sorrow is not our enemy. It is our teacher. It is the key that opens the door to a deeper understanding. It is the breaking of the shell, allowing something new to emerge. When we experience sorrow, we are being asked to confront something deeper within us. It is not a punishment, but a call to go inward, to face the parts of ourselves that we have been avoiding. The mask of sorrow is not meant to stay in place forever. It is not meant to define us, but to transform us. When we are willing to face it, to look beneath it, we find something beautiful, the truth that sorrow is the vessel in which joy is born. Without sorrow, joy would be hollow. Without pain, we would never fully appreciate the sweetness of love. Without loss, we could never understand the true value of what we hold. The mask of sorrow, when we are brave enough to remove it, becomes the mirror in which we see our true selves. It is not a face to hide behind, but a path to our freedom. And when we peel away this mask, when we look beyond the veil of grief, we realize that the joy we seek has been with us all along, hidden inside the sorrow we feared. In the end, sorrow is not a weight that holds us back, but a bridge that leads us home to the joy that awaits. There is a secret within pain, a hidden seed buried deep beneath the surface of our suffering. At the moment of anguish, it seems impossible to see any light, any hope, any trace of joy. But Khalil Gibran knew that this pain is not the end of the story. He wrote, "Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding." Pain does not destroy us. It transforms us. It opens our eyes, our hearts, our souls to a deeper understanding of life and of ourselves. In every moment of suffering, there is something being born. In every tear, there is a new layer of the soul being uncovered. In every heartbreak, there is the potential for a greater capacity to love. Joy, like the seed, is hidden beneath the soil of sorrow. We cannot see it in the darkness, but it is there, growing, waiting for the right moment to sprout. When we resist pain, when we fight against it, we blind ourselves to its deeper purpose. But when we allow ourselves to fully experience it, to sit with it, to embrace it without fear, we begin to see the truth that lies within. Pain is the soil in which joy takes root. Without pain, joy would not be as sweet. Without loss, we would never fully appreciate love. Without struggle, we would not understand the value of peace. In the deepest sorrow, there is a space for joy to bloom, like a flower that rises from the darkest earth, its roots growing stronger in the shadow. When we let ourselves feel the full weight of our suffering, when we stop running from it, we begin to realize that it is through this very pain that we become whole. We understand ourselves more fully. We grow stronger. We become more compassionate. And we find that the joy we thought was lost was only waiting to be revealed. The seed of joy in pain is not something we can always see immediately, but it is there, waiting for the right time to emerge. It is a quiet promise that the sorrow we experience is not in vain. It is a necessary step in our journey toward healing, toward awakening, toward joy. To embrace sorrow is not to be consumed by it, but to recognize it as part of the human experience, a passage, not a permanent state. In a world that constantly seeks to avoid pain, we often see sorrow as something to be feared, something to escape, something to hide from. Yet Khalil Gibran teaches us that sorrow is not the enemy. He writes, "Your sorrow is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding." When we resist sorrow, when we push it away, we allow it to control us. But when we embrace it, we invite understanding. We open ourselves to the lesson it has to offer. Sorrow is not meant to break us, but to shape us. It is a force that, when met with courage, can lead us to deeper wisdom, greater compassion, and a truer sense of self. By embracing sorrow, we allow ourselves to feel fully, without fear of what we might discover within. It is through this deep feeling that we connect to the world around us, that we truly understand the fragility of life, the beauty of impermanence. To embrace sorrow is to acknowledge that pain is a natural part of the ebb and flow of existence. It is not something we must avoid at all costs, but something that can be woven into the fabric of our being. It teaches us humility, teaches us to honor the complexity of our emotions, and helps us understand the fullness of life. When we resist sorrow, we resist growth. When we fear it, we fear the wisdom it can bring. But when we open ourselves to it, we begin to see that sorrow is not a curse, but a blessing in disguise. Embracing sorrow means accepting that joy cannot exist without it, that the two are inseparable, partners in the dance of life. By welcoming sorrow, we create space for joy to rise, for healing to begin, for our souls to expand. Sorrow is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new chapter, one in which we grow stronger, wiser, more compassionate, and through this growth, we find a deeper joy than we could ever imagine. Life is a paradox. a dance of opposites, where joy and sorrow intertwine, where light and darkness meet. It is in this paradox that we find the richness of existence, the depth of meaning, the fullness of the human experience. Khalil Gibran captured this truth when he wrote, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked, and the self-same well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with your tears." We live in a world that teaches us to avoid pain, to run from suffering, to seek only the light. But Gibran shows us that joy cannot exist without sorrow, just as light cannot exist without darkness. It is the interplay of the two that creates the fullness of life. When we embrace this paradox, we begin to understand that sorrow is not something to be feared. It is not something that takes away from our joy. It is something that deepens it, makes it richer, makes it more profound. In moments of sorrow, we are given the gift of depth. We are shown the fragility of life, the beauty of impermanence, the preciousness of every moment. And it is from this depth that joy arises not as a fleeting superficial emotion, but as a profound understanding of what it means to be alive. The paradox of life is not a contradiction, it is a truth. The two forces, joy and sorrow, were not enemies, but companions. They are the yin and yang of existence, the two sides of the same coin. One cannot exist without the other. When we deny sorrow, we deny joy. When we resist pain, we resist the depth of love. But when we accept the paradox, when we accept both joy and sorrow as essential parts of our experience, we begin to live fully, to embrace life as it is, in all its complexity, in all its beauty. This is the paradox of life. The more we accept sorrow, the more we find joy. The more we allow ourselves to feel the full spectrum of emotions, the deeper our capacity for happiness becomes. The paradox is not something to escape from, it is something to embrace, and in embracing it, we find the true meaning of life. In the stillness of pain, we hear the voice of joy. It is not loud, it is not demanding, but it is present, waiting to be noticed, waiting to rise. Pain is often silent, not in the way that we expect. It does not always scream or shout. At times, it is a quiet, unspoken ache, a weight that settles deeply into our being. We feel it in the heart, in the soul, in the places we do not speak of. But within this silence, there is a voice, soft but steady, whispering of hope, of light, of something beyond the pain we feel. Khalil Gibran wrote, "In the depth of your hopes and desires lies your silent knowledge of the beyond." Pain in its silence speaks to us of truth, of what is real and eternal. It opens the door to a deeper understanding of ourselves, a space where joy is not just a fleeting emotion, but a steady presence, a light that shines through the cracks of our sorrow. When we allow ourselves to sit in the silence of pain, when we stop fighting it, we begin to hear the quiet voice of joy. It is not loud, it does not demand our attention, but it is always there, rooted in the depth of our being. In the silence, we learn to listen to the rhythm of life, to the gentle pulse that connects joy and sorrow. When we stop seeking external validation, when we stop running from discomfort, we open ourselves to the deeper joy that lies beneath the surface. This joy is not dependent on circumstances, on external events, or on fleeting pleasures. It is the voice of the soul, a quiet, eternal truth that emerges from the depths of pain. It is the joy that comes from knowing we are whole, even in our brokenness. It is the joy that comes from embracing both light and shadow. The voice of joy is soft, but it is unshakable. It does not vanish when pain arrives. In fact, it is through pain that it is most deeply felt, because joy is not the absence of sorrow. It is the presence of something greater, something that transcends both. In the silence of pain, we hear the call to return to our true selves, to the joy that lies within us, waiting to be awakened. The heart is not just a vessel of love, it is also the seat of our pain. It is the place where we feel the depths of sorrow, the place where our wounds reside, and yet it is also the place where joy can bloom. Khalil Gibran understood that the heart does not simply carry our happiness, but also our suffering. It is both the wellspring of our deepest love and the source of our deepest pain. We cannot separate the two, for both are integral to the experience of being fully alive. He wrote, "Your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding." The suffering of the heart is not something we can simply push aside, not something to be avoided or feared. It is part of what makes us human, part of what makes us capable of deep connection, of great love, of true empathy. Without the suffering of the heart, we would never understand the depth of love, for it is through our pain that we learn to love more fully. We learn to embrace others in their sorrow, to offer compassion and understanding, because we have known the ache of the heart ourselves. The heart's suffering teaches us humility. It teaches us that we are not invincible, that we are fragile, that life can be as fleeting as it is beautiful. But it is also in this fragility that we find our strength. It is through the breaking of the heart that we become more compassionate, more aware of the suffering of others, more attuned to the delicate beauty of life. Through the suffering of the heart, we grow, we learn, we expand, we become more whole. Khalil Gibran beautifully stated, "Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars." The heart is not meant to remain broken forever. It is through the pain that the heart learns to open, to stretch, to embrace the fullness of life. In the depth of our suffering, we find the capacity for immense love. In our heartbreak, we find the strength to heal, and in healing, we find a joy that is born from understanding, from growth, from connection. The suffering of the heart is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. For it is in the depth of our wounds that we find the seeds of our healing. It is in the suffering of the heart that we are transformed, that we learn to love more deeply, and that we come to understand the true meaning of life. The path to healing does not begin in joy. It begins in sorrow. We often seek to avoid pain, to run from it, to distract ourselves from it. But Khalil Gibran teaches us that it is through our suffering that we find our healing, through our wounds that we are made whole. He writes, "Out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars." Healing is not the erasure of pain, but the transformation of it. It is not about making the pain disappear, but about learning to live with it, to integrate it into the fabric of who we are. Sorrow is not an obstacle to our healing, but a bridge that leads us to a deeper understanding of ourselves, of life, of love. When we open ourselves to sorrow, when we allow it to wash over us instead of running from it, we begin to heal. But this healing is not instant. It is a process, a slow unfolding of the soul. Pain forces us to stop. It forces us to look inward, to face the things we would rather avoid, to confront the truth of who we are and what we have experienced. In this confrontation, we find the seeds of healing. It is only when we face our sorrow that we can begin to understand its purpose. Pain teaches us humility, teaches us to be present, teaches us to appreciate the fleeting beauty of life. Through sorrow, we are purified. We shed the illusions that hold us back, the ego that masks our true selves, the false identities we have created to shield ourselves from the truth. As we move through sorrow, we begin to feel the stirrings of joy, but this joy is different from the fleeting happiness we once sought. It is deeper, richer, more lasting. It is the joy that comes from understanding, from acceptance, from the knowledge that we are not defined by our pain, but by how we respond to it. Healing through sorrow is not about forgetting the past, but about transforming it. It is about understanding that the wounds we carry are not burdens, but gifts. Gifts that allow us to grow, to love, to connect with others in ways we never could have before. In the end, sorrow does not destroy us. It refines us, makes us more compassionate, more present, more attuned to the suffering of others. Through this refinement, we find our truest selves. Healing through sorrow is the path to true joy, a joy that is born not from the absence of pain, but from the wisdom we gain through it. The joy of the soul is not the joy of the fleeting moments, not the joy that dances lightly on the surface of our lives. It is the joy that comes from deep within, the joy that is born from knowing the fullness of life, from understanding both its light and its darkness. Khalil Gibran understood this profound truth. The deeper that sorrow carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. This joy is not a passing emotion. It is not something we seek outside of ourselves, in the external world, in the applause of others, or the accumulation of things. It is the joy that is already within us, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be awakened. The joy of the soul is the joy of acceptance. It is the joy that comes when we stop running from our pain, when we stop avoiding the darkness, and instead allow it to be a part of us. It is the joy that rises when we acknowledge our suffering, but do not let it define us. This joy is born from the wisdom that comes through pain, from the healing that comes through sorrow, from the understanding that joy and sorrow are not separate, but two sides of the same coin. It is the joy that comes from embracing life in its fullness, in its complexity, in its mystery. When we let go of the illusions that keep us trapped in the search for external happiness, we discover the true joy that resides within us. It is the joy that is ever present, not dependent on circumstances, not fleeting, but constant, rooted in the soul. The joy of the soul does not fade with time, for it is not bound by time. It is eternal, like the soul itself, always there, waiting to be realized. In the depth of our sorrow, in the quiet of our pain, we find that joy is not far away. It is not something we must chase. It is within us, always, waiting for us to awaken to it. The joy of the soul is not the joy of the world. It is the joy that comes from knowing who we truly are, from understanding our connection to all that is. It is the joy of unity, of oneness with the One. And in this joy, we are whole, we are at peace, we are free. The joy of the soul is the joy of being, the joy of simply being alive. It is the joy that comes from knowing that we are not defined by our circumstances, but by our capacity to love, to learn, to grow, and to embrace all that life has to offer.